I had lived in this house for over 30 years. Every corner held a memory. My late husband's laughter echoing in the courtyard, the scent of jasmine from the garden he planted with his own hands, the faded marks on the wall where my son used to measure his height as a little boy. To me, this house was not just bricks and walls. It was a living diary of love, sacrifice, and family. But ever since my son got married, the air inside these walls had changed. My daughter-in-law, Aisha, entered the house with beauty on her face and ice in her heart. In the beginning, I tried to welcome her warmly, telling myself that she would bring new joy into our family. After all, a daughter-in-law is meant to be like a daughter, isn't she? I cooked her favorite meals, shared the family's old stories, even gave her the jewelry my mother-in-law once gave me. But the warmth I offered never reflected back. Her smiles were brief, her words sharp, and her eyes, always calculating, always cold. She walked through the halls as though she owned them already, rearranging furniture without asking, dismissing the traditions I held dear, and treating me not like family, but like an obstacle. Still, I told myself to stay patient. For the sake of my son, I swallowed every hurtful remark, every dismissive gesture. I believed that one day she would see me as more than just an old woman living in her way. Yet the tension only grew stronger, like shadows creeping silently across a room when the sun begins to set. One evening, as I sat in the living room sipping tea, I overheard her speaking on the phone. Her voice was low, but the words pierced me like daggers. This house should have been ours already. Why should we wait? Old people hold on to things far too long. My heart sank. For the first time, I realized her coldness was not just arrogance, it was greed. I clutched my teacup tighter, my hands trembling. The walls that once gave me comfort suddenly felt heavy, as if they were pressing down on me, warning me of a storm yet to come. I had no idea then how far she would go, or how deeply she would wound me, because this was only the beginning. And soon, her demand would shatter the very peace of my home. The days that followed were heavy with unspoken words. On the surface, life in the house moved on. Meals were prepared, the front gate opened and closed with my son's comings and goings, and the walls stood as silently as ever. But beneath that thin layer of normalcy, cracks had begun to spread, and I felt them widening with each passing day. Family dinners, which once used to be moments of togetherness, turned into battles fought with glances and half-smiles. Aisha would sit at the dining table with her phone in one hand, barely touching the food I had spent hours preparing. She would wrinkle her nose at my cooking, sometimes even pushing the plate away with a careless laugh. "This is too oily," she'd say, or "No one eats like this anymore." Her words stung more than she realized, or perhaps more than she cared to admit. My son, Imran, sat between us, his silence louder than her insults. He never defended me, never told her to show respect. He would just lower his gaze, chew his food quietly, and hope the evening would pass without escalation. But to me, his silence was betrayal in disguise. Every time he looked away, I felt more alone in my own home. I remember one particular evening vividly. I had made biryani, Imran's favorite since childhood. The fragrance filled the house, reminding me of the countless Fridays I had cooked the same dish for him and his father. I set the pot on the table with a small smile, waiting for him to taste it. Before he could, Aisha scoffed loudly. "Do we really have to eat this old-fashioned food every week? Can't we order something modern for once? Pizza, maybe?" Her words struck me like a slap. Imran hesitated, his fork hovering over the plate. For a moment, I hoped he would say something, just a small defense, a reminder of the traditions he once cherished. But he sighed and said softly, "Maybe next time, Ami, we could try something different." That night, I sat alone in my room, the untouched biryani still warm in the pot. Tears blurred my vision as I asked myself when my son had stopped valuing the things that once meant everything to him. Had his wife's voice become louder than his mother's memories? The small humiliations grew day by day. Aisha began inviting her friends over, laughing and gossiping in the living room while I stayed confined to my bedroom. She would leave dirty cups and plates scattered across the furniture, expecting me to clean after them, as though I were a servant, and not the woman who had built this home brick by brick alongside my late husband. When relatives visited, she wore a mask of sweetness, serving tea with exaggerated politeness, showering Imran with affectionate words. They all praised her, saying what a lovely modern wife she was. None of them saw the way her eyes hardened when the guests left, or how quickly her smile dissolved into contempt. I endured it all, clinging to the hope that Imran would one day realize the truth. But hope is a fragile thing, and with each passing insult, it grew weaker, like a candle flickering in the wind. One night, as I cleared the dining table, I caught Aisha watching me with a faint smirk. She leaned close enough for only me to hear and whispered, "Don't get too comfortable in this house." Nothing lasts forever. Her words chilled me to the bone. I didn't yet know what she truly meant, but in my heart I sensed that something darker was on the horizon. A storm was building, and soon it would break. The storm I had sensed finally came one night. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that usually brought me comfort. But that night, it felt different, uneasy, almost suffocating. I was in my room, sitting by the window, the dim glow of the streetlight casting long shadows across the walls. My heart was restless. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe it was the weight of the past few weeks. But I knew something was coming. The clock had just struck midnight when I heard the soft but deliberate click of my bedroom door. I looked up, startled, and there she was, Aisha. Her face was pale, her eyes sharp, glittering with something I had never seen before. She didn't bother with pleasantries. She stepped inside, closed the door behind her, and folded her arms as though she had already won a battle I didn't even know I was fighting. "Ami," she began, her voice low but firm. "We need to talk, and it can't wait any longer." I forced a smile, hoping perhaps it was about something trivial, but deep inside, I knew. "It's late, Beta," I said softly. "Whatever it is, we can discuss it tomorrow." She shook her head. "No, tonight, right now." And then she said it, the words that ripped through me like a blade cutting into flesh. "Hand me the house papers now, or get out." For a moment, I thought I had misheard. My ears rang. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it echoing in my chest. What did you just say?" I whispered, my hands trembling. "You heard me," she replied coldly. "This house should belong to Imran and me. You've lived here long enough. Either you hand over the papers and make it official, or you leave. Those are your only options." My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't arrogance anymore. This wasn't casual disrespect. This was greed, bare and unapologetic. My knees felt weak, and I gripped the edge of the chair to steady myself. "Aisha, this house is my home. Your father-in-law and I built it together. Every stone, every wall holds his memory. And you want me to just hand it over?" She rolled her eyes, her lips curling into a cruel smile. "Sentiments don't pay bills, Ami. Times have changed. We want to remodel, maybe even sell it for something better. Why should we waste our lives in an old, crumbling house just because you're too attached to the past?" Her words stabbed deeper than any knife could. She wasn't just after the property. She wanted to erase the very foundation of my life. The memories of my husband, the laughter of my child, the love that had kept me going through years of sacrifice. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall in front of her. I tried one last time, my voice shaking yet firm. "Aisha, I am still alive. This house is mine. And as long as I am here, no one has the right to take it from me." For a moment, silence hung between us, thick and heavy. Then she leaned closer, her whisper dripping with venom. "We'll see about that. You won't last long here on your own. Imran will choose me, not you. Remember that." She left the room as abruptly as she had entered, slamming the door behind her. I sat frozen, my whole body trembling. Her words replayed in my head like a curse, each repetition tightening the knot of fear in my chest. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, wondering how my life had come to this. A daughter-in-law I had once welcomed as my own had turned into a stranger demanding my home, and a son who had yet to show where his loyalties lay. The sun rose, but it brought no comfort. Instead, it carried the weight of a terrifying question. When I turned to my son for support, would he stand with me? Or betray me? The morning after that dreadful midnight confrontation, I gathered all the courage left in me. My heart was heavy, my body weak from sleeplessness, but I told myself, Imran will understand. He is my son. I raised him with my own hands. Surely when he hears what Aisha demanded, he will see the cruelty, the disrespect, the sheer greed in her heart. I waited until he returned from work that evening. He walked in loosening his tie, his face tired but calm. I followed him to the living room, my hands twisting nervously around the edge of my dupatta. Imran, I began softly. Beta, can we talk for a moment? Just you and me. He nodded, settling into the sofa, but before I could even open my mouth, Aisha appeared, as if she had been waiting. She sat beside him, her hand slipping possessively into his, her eyes daring me to speak. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to continue. Imran. Last night, Aisha came to my room. She demanded that I hand over the house papers, or leave. My voice trembled, but I looked directly at my son, searching his face for shock, for anger, for the defense of his mother. But what I saw instead shattered me. Imran's brows furrowed, but not in outrage. He let out a long sigh, avoiding my gaze. Ami, he said quietly, don't make this bigger than it is. Aisha and I were only discussing the future. You know, things like ownership, security. What's wrong with that? My heart stopped. Discussing the future? Imran, she threatened me. In the middle of the night! She told me to hand over the house or get out. Is that what you call a discussion? Aisha's lips curved into a smug smile. Ami, you misunderstood. I didn't mean it that way. But you must admit, it makes sense for the house to be in our name now. After all, Imran is your only son. One day it will be his anyway. Why delay the inevitable? Her words were honey-coated poison, dripping sweetly into my son's ears. And worst of all, he listened. Ami, he said again, this time more firmly. Maybe Aisha is right. You're alone now. You don't need to handle all the responsibilities. If the house is in my name, at least everything will be secure. You'll still live here, nothing will change. I felt the ground vanish beneath my feet. Nothing will change? Everything had already changed. My son, my blood, was siding with his wife against me. Against the woman who had carried him in her womb, who had stayed awake nights to soothe his fever, who had sacrificed her youth to give him comfort. And now, he looked at me not as his mother, but as an obstacle to be managed. Imran, I whispered, my voice breaking. This house is all I have left of your father. It is his memory, his legacy. How can you even think of asking me to give it away while I am still alive? For a moment, his eyes flickered with guilt, but Aisha tightened her grip on his hand, her nails digging into his skin. Imran, she said sweetly, we're only trying to do what's best for everyone. Isn't that right? And he nodded. My chest felt like it was being crushed. My own son, my flesh and blood, had chosen her over me. The betrayal was sharper than any blade, more suffocating than any noose. I stood slowly, my legs trembling under me. I understand, I said quietly, though my voice trembled with pain. You've made your choice. Neither of them tried to stop me as I walked away. In my room, I collapsed onto the bed, clutching my late husband's photo to my chest. Tears poured freely now, soaking the pillow beneath me. I whispered to his smiling face in the frame. They've both turned against me. What do I do now? And for the first time since his death, I felt truly, utterly alone. Yet in that crushing loneliness, a spark of defiance flickered. Perhaps all was not lost. Perhaps hidden in the past, in the love of the man I had lost, there was something that could still protect me. I didn't know it yet, but a secret waited for me, one that could change everything. The house was quieter than ever, but not with peace, rather with the heavy silence of betrayal. After that night, I moved like a ghost through its hallways, my heart hollow, my steps heavy. I avoided Imran and Aisha, speaking only when absolutely necessary. The pain of their words and the sting of his silence haunted me day and night. One evening, as I sat alone in my room, I opened the wooden chest that had belonged to my husband. I hadn't touched it in years. Inside lay his old spectacles, some faded letters, and the watch he wore every day until his last breath. My fingers trembled as I picked up those relics, desperate for the comfort of his memory. And that's when I found it, a sealed envelope tucked beneath the lining of the chest. My heart skipped a beat. The handwriting on it was unmistakable. It was his, my late husband's. With shaking hands, I tore the envelope open. Inside was a letter, neatly folded, and a document clipped to it. I unfolded the letter first. His words leapt out at me, bringing with them the warmth of a voice I thought I'd never hear again. "My dearest wife," it began. "If you are reading this, it means fate has already separated us. I know you will be strong, but I also know you may face challenges after I am gone. That is why I am leaving behind not just memories, but protection." Tears blurred my eyes, but I forced myself to keep reading. His words spoke of his love, his trust in me, and his fear that greed could one day try to tear apart what we had built. He reminded me that this house had been registered in both our names, and that before his passing, he had updated the papers, ensuring that full ownership would remain with me until my death. Only after that could it be passed on. I clutched the paper, my chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. Attached to the letter was the updated legal document, stamped and signed. It was all there, proof that this house was mine, and mine alone, until the day I left this world. For the first time in weeks, I felt strength surge through me. My husband had thought ahead. He had protected me even from the grave. I wasn't as powerless as Aisha believed, but with that strength came caution. I knew if I revealed this too soon, they would find some way to twist it against me. Aisha was cunning, and Imran, though weak, was still under her spell. No, I couldn't show my hand yet. I needed to be careful. I hid the papers back inside the chest, locking it firmly. My tears turned from sorrow to determination. I whispered to my husband's photo on the wall, "You knew. You always knew. And you've given me the weapon I need to fight back." From that day on, I watched more closely. I listened more carefully. Aisha grew bolder, making snide remarks, inviting her friends to parade through the house as though it were already hers. Imran, blinded by her charms, followed her lead like a shadow. They believed I was defeated, that I was just an old woman waiting to be pushed out. But inside me, the fire had been rekindled. I was no longer the silent victim. I was waiting, biding my time, holding the truth close until the right moment to reveal it. And that moment was coming faster than they realized. Because Aisha, in her greed, was about to push me into a corner so tight that I would have no choice but to strike back. The question was, would the truth heal my family? Or tear it apart forever? The days that followed were tense, the air inside the house thick with suspicion. I moved quietly, guarding the secret hidden within the chest in my room, while Aisha strutted about as though she already wore a crown upon her head. She invited friends over more often, each time showing them around the house, boasting as if it belonged to her. I said nothing, but inside, I burned. It was on a Saturday evening that everything came crashing down. The sun had just set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, when I heard the sound of loud voices in the living room. Curious and cautious, I stepped out of my room, only to find Aisha standing in the center of the room, her phone pressed to her ear. Within minutes, neighbors began arriving, 2 women from across the street, a distant cousin, even Imran's friend from work. They entered with puzzled looks, whispering among themselves. And then Aisha, with the confidence of a queen about to make a proclamation, raised her voice. "Everyone here should know the truth," she declared dramatically. "This house belongs to us now, Imran and me. My mother-in-law is refusing to accept reality, and we cannot allow her to hold us back any longer." Gasps filled the room. My heart pounded as every eye turned toward me. Aisha's smile widened, savoring the humiliation she thought she was about to inflict. She continued, her words dripping with false sweetness. Ami is old. She cannot manage such a big property. For her own good, we must take responsibility. Isn't that right, Imran? My son shifted uncomfortably, glancing at me with guilt in his eyes. But he nodded nonetheless. That small motion, that tiny betrayal, struck me harder than 1,000 cruel words. Neighbors murmured, some nodding, some frowning. Aisha's cousin leaned forward. So you're saying she refuses to hand over the house papers? At her age, shouldn't she be thinking of the future? The room buzzed with speculation. I stood silently for a moment, my palms cold, my body trembling. But then something inside me shifted. No more silence. No more tears. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I stepped forward, my voice steady though my heart thundered in my chest. You want the truth? Fine, let everyone hear it. The room fell silent. Aisha's smirk faltered for the first time. I walked to my room, unlocked the chest, and pulled out the envelope my husband had left me. When I returned, all eyes followed me. I placed the papers on the table, my fingers brushing over them with reverence before I lifted them for all to see. This house, I said, my voice strong now, was built with the sweat and sacrifice of my husband and me. And before he died, he made sure I would never be left vulnerable. These are the legal papers, updated and signed, that declare full ownership remains with me until my last breath. Not Imran's, not Aisha's, mine. A collective gasp filled the room. Aisha's face turned pale, then red with rage. She lunged forward, snatching at the papers, but I pulled them back, holding them high. You think you can humiliate me in front of my family, my neighbors, my community? I continued, my voice rising with decades of pent-up strength. No, today it is you who will be exposed. You who tried to steal what was never yours. You who disrespected not only me, but the memory of the man who built this home. The neighbors began whispering, their sympathetic glances shifting toward me. One woman shook her head at Aisha, muttering, "Shameful." Another man said, "Greed destroys families." Imran buried his face in his hands, ashamed, but too cowardly to speak. Aisha, however, was not done. Her voice rose, shrill and desperate. These papers mean nothing. I deserve this house. I have a right. You have no right, I cut her off sharply. Not while I live. And if you ever dare to threaten me again, remember this night. Remember how your lies crumbled in front of everyone. The room went silent again, the weight of my words hanging heavy. For once, Aisha had no clever retort, no manipulative smile. She stood frozen, her chest heaving, her eyes wild with fury. In that moment, I realized something profound. I was not just defending bricks and walls. I was defending my dignity, my memories, my very existence. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the strength of my husband's presence beside me. But as the neighbors began to leave, whispering about the disgrace they had just witnessed, I caught a glimpse of Aisha's eyes. They were no longer just greedy. They were dangerous, and I knew. This battle was not over yet. The living room, once buzzing with whispers, had fallen eerily quiet after the crowd dispersed. Only 3 of us remained, Imran slumped in the corner, silent as a stone, Aisha pacing furiously, her face twisted with rage, and me, clutching the will as though it were a shield forged by my late husband himself. Aisha's voice finally broke the silence, shrill and venomous. Do you think this is over? Do you think a few old papers will stop me? Everyone knows you're too weak to handle this house. And Imran is my husband. Whatever is his is mine. Her words were sharp, but they no longer pierced me. Not tonight. Tonight, I had seen her schemes crack wide open in front of witnesses. Tonight, she stood exposed. I turned slowly toward Imran, my son who had once clung to my hand as a boy, begging me never to let go. And you? I asked softly, my voice trembling more with sorrow than anger. Do you also believe this house is hers now? Do you also believe your mother is a burden to be discarded? Imran lifted his head, his eyes bloodshot, his lips trembling. For a fleeting second, I thought I saw regret flicker there. But then, like a coward shielding himself, He dropped his gaze again. His silence was answer enough. That silence cut me deeper than Aisha's cruelty ever could. A mother can fight the world, but when her own child abandons her, the wound never truly heals. Aisha, emboldened by his weakness, slammed her hand on the table. Fine, if you want to cling to this place, do it. But don't expect us to stay here and live under your rules. Imran, pack our things. We're leaving. Her voice wavered on that last word, though. She hadn't expected to lose. She hadn't expected me to stand tall. And in that wavering tone, I heard the beginning of her downfall. Neighbors' whispers spread faster than wildfire. By the next morning, calls began to pour in, relatives asking if it was true that Aisha had tried to publicly snatch the house. Some even scolded Imran for allowing his wife to disgrace me so openly. The proud image Aisha had tried to build crumbled before her very eyes. The shift in power was palpable. Once she had strutted through the house, issuing commands like a queen. Now she shrank in the shadows, glaring at me with venom but too afraid to meet my eyes directly. She knew she had been stripped of her illusion, but victory did not taste sweet. I looked at Imran, my only son, and saw a man too weak to defend his mother, too blind to see through his wife's greed. And though I had won, the ache in my chest reminded me of all I had lost. One evening, as I sat alone on the veranda, the will resting in my lap, I whispered to my late husband, "I kept your promise. I protected what you left for me. But the cost, oh, the cost." Behind me, I heard the sound of a suitcase rolling across the floor. Aisha's voice followed, cold and clipped. "Come on, Imran, let her rot here with her memories." I didn't turn to stop them. I didn't beg. I simply closed my eyes, breathing in the night air, steadying myself against the ache. When their footsteps faded, I opened my eyes again. The house was quiet, but it no longer felt empty. For the first time in years, it felt like mine again, not because of the papers, but because I had found the strength to defend it. Yet even in that quiet, I knew one truth. Though greed had collapsed, the scars of betrayal would never vanish. A mother may forgive, but she never forgets. Still, justice had turned in my favor. The vultures had been driven out. The home stood safe, not as a prize of revenge, but as a symbol of resilience. And though my heart was heavy, I sat a little straighter, knowing I had not only fought for my house, I had fought for my dignity, and I had won. The house was silent after they left, the echo of their footsteps fading into the night, like a storm that had finally passed. I sat alone in the living room, the familiar creak of the old armchair beneath me, and let the stillness wash over me. For the first time in months, there was no shouting, no demands, no poisonous whispers in the corners of my home. Only peace. I looked around at the photographs on the walls, my late husband's gentle smile, the innocent laughter of Imran as a child, family gatherings from years gone by. This house wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was memory, sacrifice, and love woven into every corner. And though the battle had scarred me deeply, I knew I had done what was right, not just for me, but for the promise my husband and I had made to one another. Days passed, and slowly, life began to settle into a rhythm again. Neighbors would come by with kind words, offering comfort and praise for standing my ground. Some even admitted they had admired my silence in the face of cruelty, though they hadn't dared speak before. Their respect warmed me, but it could never fully heal the wound of my son's betrayal. At night, when the house grew quiet, I would sometimes imagine Imran as the boy he once was, running through these halls, clinging to me for comfort after a nightmare. I whispered into the empty air, hoping that somewhere in his heart, the son I once knew still existed. But I did not wait for him. I could no longer anchor my life on someone who had chosen greed over love. Instead, I anchored myself in strength. I opened windows to let the sunlight pour in. I cleaned each room, not as a chore, but as a reclaiming of space. Every corner shone brighter, and with each day so did I. One morning, as I sat in the garden, I realized something profound. Revenge had never been my victory. No, my victory was survival. Standing tall when everything tried to bend me. holding on to my dignity when others tried to strip it away. The house stood as a fortress not just of stone, but of truth. Greed had been exposed, lies had crumbled, and justice had prevailed, not in a courtroom, but in the court of life itself. I know now that families can be broken by greed, that blood ties are not always bonds of love, yet I also know that truth has a light that cannot be extinguished, no matter how dark the shadows. As I sat with the morning sun warming my face, I whispered to myself, I am not broken. I am still here. And in that quiet moment, I felt a peace deeper than any victory could bring, because in the end, greed may destroy families. But truth always shines.